Good evening, you're watching India First. I'm Gaurav Sawant. Big story coming in. Union Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has exposed the double standards of the Western Bloc on sanctions on Russian oil. Very politely, very firmly, and with a big smile on his face, he's very clearly put India first and Indian interests supreme. The Commerce Minister was speaking in Berlin. The conversation came around Trump tariff sanctions and Russian oil. The US sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil imposed on the 22nd of October. And I want to give you a little background. So the US Treasury imposed sanctions on the two Russian companies under an executive order 14024, target the Russian oil giants to curb Moscow's war funding. So as secondary sanctions, they've penalized third countries and entities dealing with these firms, prompting compliance from major buyers like India and China. However, and this is where the devil is in the detail, some European countries with deep energy ties with Russia have actively sought exemptions or work around the sanctions. I'll get you more on the story, but first, listen in to Union Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal talking about Germany and UK either actively seeking or being granted a special license. Listen in to Piyush Goyal.
So I was reading in today's paper, Germany is asking for exemption from US sanctions on oil. Now these are UK already has sorted and probably got an exemption for procuring oil from the US.
This is about the Rosneft deal, sanctions, I think, and we've sorted out the issues with Germany. We managed to do that very quickly, and I think the Americans will do something very similar.
So then why single out India?
Well, it's a specific subsidiary in relation to Rosneft.
We also have a subsidiary in India of the Rosneft.
Well, come and talk to us.
Why single out India? That is what Union Commerce Minister of India, Piyush Goyal, says. So if companies in Germany are seeking and are being granted an exemption, and subsidiaries of Rosneft, if companies in the United Kingdom are seeking and are being granted an exemption, if companies in Hungary are seeking and are being granted an exemption or continue to take oil from Russia, why sanction India or companies in India? Joining me for more on India First is the group Business Today's group's managing editor, Siddharth Zarabi. Siddharth, Piyush Goyal, very politely but very firmly, a smile on his face, has exposed the double standards of the West. Imposing sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil would impact India and Germany, but India and China, but Germany, UK, they're seeking or are being granted exemptions.
And you know what Minister Goyal is doing, and he called it out in Berlin, by the way, is something that's been happening ever since the Russia-Ukraine war started and the energy crisis that Europe faced and their dependence on Russian energy. This is not the first time, and I'm really glad that it was called out in the manner it was, because this preferential kind of a way and this Western bloc coming together and people of the same kind therefore aligning against people of the other kind, I think this is a sentiment that Commerce Minister has called out. Why is it significant? Because remember, even for the United States, their trade actions have not been uniform across the world.
Yes.
The way they have treated the single largest buyer of Russian crude oil, which is China, and continues to do so. And imagine, Gaurav, a scenario as companies like Reliance, and Reliance has, by the way, over the last hour or so, put out a statement where they have acknowledged the sanctions and said that they are going to assess how do they navigate this effectively. I think China will become a beneficiary of even cheaper Russian crude because the Russians won't have an option. And imagine the dichotomy or the stupidity of a trade strategy where China, supposedly #1 rival of the United States, manages and gets to save more money, billions of dollars more, on importing cheaper Russian crude. So,
absolutely.
So it is the absolute ramshackle nature of the approach of the Western bloc to Russian.
No, and the double standards, they're blatant double standards. America continues to get palladium. America continues to buy fertilizer, but America does not want any other country to take it from Russia. Before I get you more on the story, and Siddharth and I will focus on these double standards that Piyush Goyal has so openly exposed. Listen in to India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal in Berlin once again.
So I was reading in today's paper, Germany is asking for exemption from US sanctions on oil. Now these are UK already has sorted and probably got an exemption for procuring oil from the US.
This is about the Rosneft deal, sanctions, I think, and we've sorted out the issues with Germany. We managed to do that very quickly, and I think the Americans will do something very similar.
So then why single out India?
Well, it's a specific subsidiary in relation to Rosneft.
We also have a subsidiary in India of the Rosneft.
Well, come and talk to us.
He has a smile on his face, but he's saying it very clearly, Siddharth. Why single India out? And this is information that's in public domain. So Germany is actively seeking exemption for Rosneft's German subsidiary, and Germany is lobbying the US Treasury for a formal waiver, is what sources are telling India today. The devil very clearly here is in the detail. So there are two units, we are told even in the UK, that are either seeking or have been granted exemption.
On a broader basis, Europe surrendered its security sovereignty long back to the United States. It did not focus on its energy security. Germany has for years was called the sick man of Europe. They put environment in front, and today are in a situation where while they are always morally calling out the Russian invasion of Ukraine as it should be, the fact is that they are tied to the hip to Russia as far as energy security is concerned. And remember that pipeline that was blown up in very highly suspicious circumstances, that caused further problems. So effectively, and that response, come and talk to us, with that smirk on the face, reveals not just ignorance or the fact that Rosneft is one of the largest investors in India. It also shows how these countries and this trading bloc has for decades lived off cheap Russian gas. And when the chips came calling, it is India that is being pressurized. And I think this is a very significant moment at this point of time. Gaurav, remember, there is a 30-day period for the sanctions to take into effect. And I really hope that the envelope gets pushed even further on this.
Oh, absolutely, because it's not just the United Kingdom, it's not just Germany. What we are also learning is countries like Hungary, they're also exploring ways to work around these sanctions. Incidentally, the EU's 19th sanctions package, apparently, it seeks to or already does spare Lukoil. So it just, Siddharth, it just goes on to show that there are different rules for different entities, sparing some, taking action against others.
So it also shows that the United States and major European economies are not on the same page. And this is another defining feature of what President Trump has unleashed on the world. Look at Canada. That trade deal not worth the paper that it was signed on. Look at what has happened with Japan, and look at how European partners have been put out in the cold. Literally, the winter is upon Europe and much of the Western Hemisphere. They have been left out in the cold. And as you keep counting countries, and more points of view will come out, for them dealing with that winter without cheap Russian energy supplies will become an existential question.
Now let's talk about the politics around this subject in our country. Siddharth, stay with me. But Union Commerce Minister, before we move on, I want you to listen in to Union Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal once again.
Now these are UK already has sorted and probably got an exemption for procuring oil from the US.
This is about the Rosneft deal, sanctions, I think, and we've sorted out the issues with Germany. We managed to do that very quickly, and I think the Americans will do something very similar.
So then why single out India?
Well, it's a specific subsidiary in relation to Rosneft.
We also have a subsidiary in India of the Rosneft.
Well, to come and talk to us.
So I was reading in today's paper, Germany is asking for exemption from US sanctions on oil.
A major political storm has broken out after the White House claimed that India is scaling back Russian oil imports, not on its terms, but at the request of US President Donald Trump. The claim has given the opposition fresh ammunition to accuse the Narendra Modi government of buckling under US pressure. The opposition had earlier said Prime Minister Narendra Modi is avoiding President Trump, saying his decision to attend the ASEAN Summit virtually is proof of India's diplomatic retreat. The BJP insists India's oil decisions are sovereign, strategic, and in national interest. As the political crossfire intensifies, Union Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, he struck a hopeful note, saying or indicating that a trade deal with the US could soon be on the horizon. So is India's shift on Russian oil a sign of smart strategy or soft surrender?
Oil, optics and opposition. The White House has said that India is scaling back Russian oil imports at the request of US President Donald Trump, triggering a fresh round of attacks by the Congress.
If you read the sanctions and look at them, they're pretty hefty. And I saw some international news out of China this morning that they're scaling back oil purchases from Russia. We know India has done the same at the request of the president.
Soon after the statement by the White House, Reliance Industries, India's biggest private refiner, confirmed that it was calibrating Russian imports to align with New Delhi's evolving energy guidelines. The Congress says the move is proof that the government is bending under foreign pressure, claiming that the chain of command is Trump ordering and Modi obeying, whether it's about seizing the war with Pakistan or stopping Russian oil imports.
ट्रंप ने मोदी जी को अपना जूनियर एम्प्लॉय समझ रखा। ट्रंप के आदेश से मोदी जी तेल खरीदना रसिया से कम कर देंगे, ये हमारे लिए शर्मनाक बात है।
India's U-turn on Russian oil has given the opposition more ammunition to attack after already firing jabs of the Prime Minister's decision to attend the ASEAN Summit virtually. The Congress said that the Prime Minister is skipping the summit as a deliberate diplomatic dodge to avoid Trump, alleging a soft surrender. But the BJP insists that India's decisions on energy are entirely sovereign, calling the oil decision a strategic move in India's national interest. Relations between India and the United States remain under strain, and talks on a trade deal remain stuck. But on the same day as the realignment in India's energy sourcing, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has said that India is hopeful of a trade deal in the near future.
We are in dialogue with the United States of America. We hope to work towards a fair and equitable agreement in the near future.
With a physical Modi-Trump meeting off the cards for now, is India's decision on Russian oil strategic or a safe surrender? Bureau Report, India Today.
The Trump administration's new sanctions on Russian oil mark the toughest yet by the United States on Moscow's energy sector. Now, under the new American rules, American banks and firms are banned from doing business with Russia's biggest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. There are also secondary penalties for foreign buyers or shippers using US dollars or American technology, with fines that can reach up to $1 million per violation. The sanctions aim to slash Russia's $150 to $190 billion oil income, which is nearly a quarter of its federal budget. And much of it, according to the West, is being used to fund the Ukraine war. Donald Trump had earlier pledged to starve President Putin's war machine. Enforcement will be handled by the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, which will monitor using satellite tracking and financial monitoring with exemptions for significant cooperation. Now, the initial goal is to hold up to 3 million barrels a day of Russian oil exports. Soon after President Trump's moves, the global oil market, it reacted sharply. Brent crude jumped 8% to $92 a barrel. Russian Ural, now that blend slipped before 50. Overall, when you look at prices, they remain extremely volatile right now.
Today is a very big day in terms of what we're doing. Look, these are tremendous sanctions. These are very big. Those are against their two big oil companies, and we hope that they won't be on for long. We hope that the war will be settled. We just answered having to do with the various forms of missiles and everything else that we're looking at, but we don't think that's going to be necessary.
In a major development with implications for India's crude oil supply, India's imports of Russian crude oil are expected to fall to nearly zero by the end of 2025, following the latest US sanctions on Russian energy giants Rosneft and Lukoil. The move marks the most significant realignment in India's energy sourcing in recent years, driven by Washington's tightening of economic measures against Moscow. Reliance Industries Limited, India's leading private sector refiner and previously the largest importer of Russian crude, had signed a landmark long-term contract with Rosneft in December 2024 to import up to 500,000 barrels daily. A deal valued at billions of dollars and central to India's post-pandemic energy strategy. But now, with the US embargo intensifying, Reliance is expected to suspend all imports under that pact, actively seeking replacements across Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Qatar, and US West Texas intermediate grades, according to news reports.
I love the people of India, and we're working on some great deals between our countries. I spoke to the Prime Minister Modi today, as I mentioned before, and we just have a very good relationship. And he's not going to buy much oil from Russia. He wants to see that war end as much as I do. He wants to see the war end with Russia, Ukraine. And as you know, they're not going to be buying too much oil. So they've cut it way back, and they're continuing to cut it way back.
The US sanctions announced in October 2025 target key Russian firms, Rosneft, Lukoil, and their affiliates, blocking access to US dollar financing, payment channels, and shipping routes. These measures have made it extremely challenging for Indian companies to deal directly with sanctioned entities, effectively cutting off the flow of Russian oil. India's dependence on Russian crude had previously ranged as high as 39% in mid-2024, accounting for over 1.7 million barrels per day. Industry data now indicates a sharp decline, with estimates suggesting Russian flows will diminish to below 5% of total imports by December, potentially approaching near zero in early 2026. India's refiners are now actively replacing Russian crude with volumes from the Middle East, the US, Brazil, and West Africa. This diversification has helped sustain domestic fuel supply, with retail petrol and diesel prices remaining stable at around 100 rupees per litre. Energy experts warn that Russian supply could nearly cease entirely if sanctions tighten further or if Moscow's oil export pipelines are fully blockaded. Nevertheless, India's strategic diversification, rapid sourcing adjustments, and flexible contracting practices aim to mitigate supply disruptions and maintain energy security. From Reliance's efforts to diversify supplies to government policies steering away from Russian dependence, India is now navigating a significantly altered energy landscape, one that prioritizes resilience, diversification, and compliance.
So the opposition is accusing the Narendra Modi government of surrendering to the US and compromising ties with a comprehensive strategic partner, Russia. The opposition is also accusing the government of retreating from public diplomacy, not wanting to face President Trump. But is there merit in this criticism? Is it a smart strategy adopted by India or a soft surrender to Trump? Joining me on India First is Salman Soz, leader and spokesperson of the Congress Party, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanar, former ambassador to Kazakhstan, Sweden and Latvia. Professor Anand Ranganathan is a well-respected author and analyst, and Siddharth Zarabi is group managing editor, Business Today. Gentlemen, welcome. Salman Soz, the recalibration on Russian oil comes after US imposed sanctions on Russian oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil. How is it surrender if oil companies now recalibrate their procurement from Russia, sir?
Gaurav, it is surrender, but it is also a very, very strange thing to see. India is not a small player in the world. India is a major economy, major country, major political force in the world. And we seem to be conducting our affairs in, to my mind, a non-strategic way. And it's almost like we're getting bullied by the American president. He seems to take great pleasure in trolling us. Every time something happens, he's the first one out of the gates to announce something, whether it happened during Operation Sindoor, and now he talked about how India was going to recalibrate our kind of energy strategy. And he's the one making these announcements. Meanwhile, our Prime Minister is quiet, and he hides behind diplomatic speak of the Ministry of External Affairs, which I think is very unfortunate. By the way, this whole idea that the Prime Minister would not go to ASEAN is it's incredibly distressing. ASEAN is a big block of countries, almost 700 million people. They're a very important trade partner for us. This is an opportunity for India to push its advantage. China is going through a deflationary cycle.
I'll come to ASEAN in just a moment. May I keep it on oil for the first part of this debate? I'm coming to ASEAN and diplomacy in just a moment. Professor Ranganathan, US President Trump is announcing what government of India intends to do. Salman Soz says he's virtually trolling this government. Does this, as the Congress indicates, surrender? Does this indicate surrender, or does it make financial sense? Does it make financial sense to continue procurement of oil from Russia, even if these companies have been placed under sanctions, sir?
Good evening, Gaurav, and good evening to my fellow panelists. No, I disagree with my good friend Salman on 3 counts. Number 1, if it was surrender, then 2 months ago when Trump levied those awful tariffs, hypocritical tariffs as I call them, on account of us buying Russian oil, 25%, and demanded that India stop buying Russian oil. Since that time, we bought 130 million barrels of Russian oil. Would you call that surrender? No. We've kept the same amount of oil that we've been buying as a proportion of the total oil that we buy from Russia, around 38 to 40%. That is anything but surrender. Now, the fact is the rules of the games have been changed, and China and India are impacted most because there were no sanctions earlier on the oil companies. There was just a price cap. And look at the hypocrisy. The $60 per barrel ice cap, the cap was done, and the European countries were also evading it. You know, what kind of sanctions were they when the Europe and all those countries were buying more oil than even Russia was buying, and India was buying more energy than India was. Now, Trump has changed the rules of the game. Now, directly, there are sanctions for the first time on the 2 major Russian oil majors, as you said. Of course, it's going to impact India's purchase of Russian oil. It's also going to impact the world oil prices. Now, this is going to affect every country, including India. How is this a surrender? I refuse to accept this as a surrender.
Okay. Salman Soz, you want to quickly respond before I bring in Siddharth Zarabi and Ambassador Sajjanar?
Yes. I wish on our show today we had a BJP spokesperson, that I could actually be a bit more forceful about things. I know.
To be fair, we tried. They chose not to come, and that's why we've got analysts, to face off with you, sir. Go on, sir.
Yes. Gaurav, that is why, let me explain why the BJP does not send its spokespersons on these kinds of shows where we're discussing some really tricky and prickly issues for the BJP. You know, you really have to think, Gaurav, you're a strategic analyst. I know that. If you think about how our oil purchases have gone, from less than 2% of our imports came from Russia before this war, and now it's about 40%. We took a lot of the oil that was coming from the Gulf. We let it, Gulf is a very important area for us. We reduced our imports from there to get oil from Russia. And suddenly, we have 40% coming from there. We did not think for a moment that if we have to take some Russian oil, maybe we go from 1 to 2% to maybe 20% or 10%. But no, we went to 40%. And then we leave ourselves vulnerable to America. And as Anand was saying, we didn't do anything when Trump said something 2 months back. Of course, we're not going to do something immediately. But can he say that Trump is now, we won't have a trade deal now? I'm pretty sure we're going to have a trade deal because Trump is putting pressure on. We didn't have to be in this position. We left ourselves open to attack. And that is, and by the way, we when you negotiate with somebody like Trump, who's a bully, you cannot negotiate from a position of weakness. You have to demonstrate strength. That is what bullies understand. And by the way, India is a strong country of 1.4 billion people with the third largest economy. Come on. What is the BJP doing? Seriously, this is inexcusable.
Okay, Anand wants to respond before I bring in Ambassador Sajjanar and Siddharth. Give me a moment. Go ahead, Professor Ranganathan.
No, of course, I'm absolutely sure and confident that my good friend Salman thinks of India's interest, even though he belongs to the Congress party. Would he not have wanted India to have saved $26 billion and kept our inflation in check on account of buying Russian oil instead of Saudi oil? Now, we are looking at our strategic and financial interest. Why shouldn't India have increased the purchase of Russian oil if it was cheaper and it was not flouting any sanctions? That makes absolute sense, Salman. Number two, I remember last time round, I didn't have enough time to rebut you when you said, look, our economy is in bad shape because FDI as a percentage of GDP has gone down. That, I'm afraid, even is a spurious comparison because that metrics is not allowed. The FDI has doubled in the last 10 years. From 45 to 85 billion dollars. The GDP has also increased robustly. So you cannot make that comparison. Let me give you a mathematical instance why you can't. If the FDI increases from 10 billion to 15 billion dollars, the GDP increases from 1 trillion to 2 trillion, the FDI as a percentage of GDP actually goes down. So please just congratulate India on doing well. You mean well. Please don't take the recourse of what
Fair enough. Now let me bring in Siddharth Zarabi quickly into this conversation, and Salman, I'll come back to you to respond to this. Siddharth, India is caught in this Russia-US crossfire. They are the ones who are actually in midst of this. US imposed sanctions on Lukoil and Rosneft. Now, does it make sense for India to continue to buy oil from Russia, either as a country or Reliance as a company, or Bharat Petroleum or Hindustan Petroleum or Indian Oil? Wouldn't that mean that we risk facing sanctions ourselves?
Gaurav, let's try and quickly understand the impact of these sanctions. And for context, I also want to compare them with earlier sanctions years ago on Iranian oil purchases. At that time also, Indian imports had come under question. There are fundamental differences between the two, and this sanction that has been imposed actually in some ways provides us an off-ramp because Russian oil purchases have become the main focal point for what is almost like a trade dispute between India and the United States. India hasn't backed down at all, and even now I think with the impact of these sanctions, the following two things will happen. If an entity in India, regardless of its ownership, were to be seen taking delivery of Russian oil, severe financial sanctions, including impact on global banking operations, will come into effect. And that is a risk that no company can afford in the current context. And since you mentioned several of those names, these are very, very large players. Therefore, there is a very significant sudden shock to other businesses that comes into play. So there is no choice really but to comply because the global financial system and all the levers attached to it are still directly under the impact and in control of the United States. Okay. That's very clear. Now, what is the consequence of this? Roughly 1/3 of our imports were coming from Russian sources. They have been tapering over the recent past few weeks and months. It's now clear that by the end of this year, or spilling over into January or February of 2026, in 3 to 4 months' time, unless these sanctions are relaxed or removed, our Russian crude oil purchases will come down to near zero. There is no other way to look at it. What do we do, therefore? As a country, at the national level, ensuring energy supplies is critical, and therefore, I am sure that at the governmental level and at the company level, rapid adjustments to buy oil from other sources will come in. And one final point. Unlike during the Iranian oil sanction era, where India sought and got specific conditional relaxations, there is very little scope of any conditional relaxations with regard to Russian oil.
Fair enough. Let me bring in Ambassador Sajjan.
Just one point. I am told that even options of purchasing Venezuelan crude are limited at this stage. So I guess we will end up buying oil from other sources, and you are already seeing a spike in global crude oil prices, which may continue in the near term.
Which may be a disaster, which may set in adverse consequences if oil prices were to go up across the world or in different parts of the world, including in India. But Ambassador Sajjan, your reading of the Congress Party criticism, is this surrender on oil?
No, it is not a surrender at all, Gaurav. Thank you very much for having me on the show. You know, there are two aspects that we need to look at. Number one is energy security. The number two is pricing. So, what the government has said, in all its articulation on the subject is that we don't tell our companies to go and buy Russian oil. We tell them go and buy where you get oil the cheapest. And they were able to get the oil cheapest from there. So they have been able to buy from there. The second aspect is in terms of the sanctions that have come. It is not only that you purchase Rosneft and Lukoil and only that aspect will be sanctioned. Big companies, for instance, government companies, Reliance, for instance, Reliance purchases about 50% of its oil from Rosneft. We purchase total of about 1.8, 1.9 million barrels oil a day. And Reliance has an agreement with Rosneft, 10-year agreement, 500,000 barrels of oil a day. Now, if it starts purchasing, Reliance has huge interest in the United States. It is going to get sanctioned. All its activities there are going to get sanctioned. The third point let me make here also is that, when there was sanctions put on Iranian oil in 2012, when it was the Barack Obama time, we were able to get a waiver for that because we said it's very important, 10 to 12% of our oil comes from Iran. So there was no problem. In 2018, when Mr. Trump levied sanctions on Iranian oil, there was no way out. We had to, now we don't import any oil at all from Iran. In Venezuela, when it came, last year we got some sort of a relaxation. So we started importing oil from Venezuela last year, Gaurav, except till April, because in April again, that waiver was taken off. The last point I make is, because of this, India has been importing. What are the sources of import of oil by India? There are 40 sources, there are 40 countries, companies from which we are importing. So, when it comes that we are not able to import oil from Rosneft and Lukoil, there are other sources. And the West Asian countries, whether it is Saudi Arabia, whether it is UAE, they have said that they are going to increase production so that if the production of Rosneft and Lukoil goes out of the international market, then they will be able to fill up that requirement. And I think India will definitely be able to. They will be able to moderate the prices.
So Salman Soz, when you look at the impact, it impacts the entire nation, goes way beyond domestic politics. your reading, sir, of your party MP and leader Shashi Tharoor suggesting that President Trump should stop making these announcements for India. India does not make announcements for him. And why does the Congress party believe, the point that you were raising about staying away initially from Sharm el-Sheikh and now from ASEAN is running away from international diplomacy?
Well, it is running away from international diplomacy. But before I get to that point, let me just address Anand's earlier point on these prices and oil per se. Ultimately, he's not a politician, but this is about politics also. What are we doing this for? If you think about it, okay, we bought Russian oil. Assume for a moment that this is a totally economic decision. That means you're keeping oil prices low. Good. But why is it not translating into lower pump prices then for people? In the last 6 years, the central government has collected 20 lakh crore rupees in fuel taxes. 20 lakh crores in excise taxes, right? So the question is, then what is happening to the citizens in whose name all of this is being done? Nothing, because you're in Delhi. I know what you pay for fuel taxes, your petrol prices, and that's how it's been for the last several years now. So that's one part of it. I won't talk about Anand's other part of FDI because that's not relevant for this discussion, but I would just say that he's wrong. I was talking about net FDI, not gross FDI. So that's maybe misunderstood. On this Sharm el-Sheikh, on ASEAN, look, ASEAN is a big, important constituency for India.
Yes.
The point, I don't understand why the Prime Minister would not go there, why the Prime Minister would not go to the biggest flashpoint in the world, which was Gaza. That is where you show leadership. That is where you show India's traditional kind of, peacemaking abilities. So I think my sense is, I think people in India realize that the Prime Minister feels uncomfortable in President Trump's presence. If President Trump is trolling us, the way to respond to him is through a social media post and say, I'm sorry, President Trump, this is not the way it is. This is a reality. This is what India is doing. There's no harm in that. Be scared. Has India done something to America? Have we done something wrong to America? We have not. Why can't the Prime Minister, in a very gentle way, maybe push back? He can. He represents 1.4 billion people, but he's not doing a good job of representing us right now.
Okay. So on Sharm el-Sheikh, permit me to just raise this issue on this debate. So we saw President Trump, he was the center of attraction, and there were several heads of state, government, kings and princes who were all there, all behind him like hangers on. And you saw the way boot polish Shahbaz Sharif was there in Sharm el-Sheikh. Trump said, you want to come here? You want to say what you were telling me? The way you were praising me? Praise me in public. Would we want our Prime Minister, Professor Ranganathan, to be in that position? Would we want our Prime Minister to be Sharm el-Sheikh, if I may? And I'll come to ASEAN, specifically on ASEAN too, because that's a very, big point. But Sharm el-Sheikh first. And, would we want our Prime Minister of the fourth largest economy, hoping, soon to be third largest economy, 1.4 billion people, to be a hanger-on behind Trump?
No, absolutely. And I'm sure Salman, in his mind, understands this point very well. If it was Dr. Manmohan Singh instead of Prime Minister Modi, our self-respect comes first. Now, you look at what Trump has, the way he's been behaving with world leaders, not just at the so-called peace summit that dictated what Gaza would be. He was basically treating powerful leaders of powerful countries, more powerful than India, from European countries as kindergarten children. Hey, you come here. Hey, you speak this. Now, obviously, his whole tone and tenor is to humiliate other leaders. As you know what happened when those 8 EU leaders of EU countries visited the White House. They were standing there like kids. Now, I'm sure Salman doesn't want this to happen to our Prime Minister, irrespective of which party he belongs to. So, why give a bully a chance to humiliate other people, especially when it creates an acrimonious attitude as far as diplomacy is concerned. The good ambassador out there would be able to tell this in much more powerful way than I am to Salman, but I'm sure Salman realizes this. As to the very quickly the other point that Salman made, I'm at the risk of repeating myself. Salman also knows this. This is the problem with my dear friend Salman.
I come to the FDI debate since it's not central to our issue
not
today.
The FDI, but why the petroleum prices have not been lowered? Just to give 30 seconds to that. Salman knows this sector has been used as a cash cow. All the welfare schemes that total much more than what the government has saved through the petroleum prices have been used for other welfare schemes, millions, hundreds of millions of toilets and gas connections and Ujjwala schemes and Ayushman Bharat. Salman knows this. I mean, half the bridges in Kashmir and roadways and highways and schools and colleges have been built on the money that the government leeches off the petroleum sector. So for him to say, why is not reflecting at the pump? He knows it inside. The problem with politicians, good friends like Salman, is they know the truth inside, but they never utter it like Trump does.
Okay, I have to bring Ambassador Sajjanar, but Salman, since you raised your hand and since you were named, please respond, sir.
Just on two things. Just on this oil part. This is not the first time oil prices in the world have been higher. And by the way, this is not the only government that has done welfare politics, right? I mean, even the Manmohan Singh government had a huge, welfare program. So this is not new. So this cannot be an excuse. As far as the Prime Minister not going to these events and should we put him in a position where he might be humiliated by Trump, I think that is exactly what surrender looks like. He's not a minor player. He's not a bit player in international politics because it's not about Narendra Modi. This is about India. And, maybe he doesn't go to this place. Okay, fine. He didn't want to go to Gaza. That's fine. But ASEAN is a very different. There's an ASEAN-India summit happening. Yes. How can you not be present for the ASEAN-India summit? That is how can you let Trump dictate everything about where you're going to go? You cannot do that. You should have enough confidence in yourself.
Fair enough. Ambassador Sajjanar, you want to respond to this?
Gaurav, India was Sharm el-Sheikh once in 2009 when we accepted that Balochistan should be included in our conversation with Pakistan. You see what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh this time. It was a victory lap for Donald Trump. Do we want to be the cheerleaders for Donald Trump? We don't. I will tell Mr. Salman Soz, I remember I was in service. India had not joined the SCO. Dr. Manmohan Singh said, I am not going to be attending any of these meetings of SCO as an observer because I don't have the time to go and sip a cup of coffee with all these people. It would have meant exactly that, sipping a cup of coffee with no purpose in mind and just sort of, cheerleading Mr. Trump. So, I think it was a very wise decision. It was a very dignified decision to send one of our ministers of state. Because, if that was the case, you could have said, okay, send the external affairs minister. I think it was not worth the while of even the external affairs minister. I don't mean any disrespect to Mr. The minister of state who went. He's good, but, it had a representation. Now, as far as ASEAN is concerned, ASEAN is a very important this thing, but it is not the only platform where we interact with ASEAN. There are many other platforms. They keep coming, the individual leaders bilaterally, they keep coming to India. India keeps going to them. This is not the only place where we would meet. One more thing is, it is always said discretion is the better part of valor. And let's face that. And I think we know that Mr. Trump is very erratic. You would recall that in 2019, Gaurav, when Trump was meeting Imran Khan in White House Oval Office, he said, I'm willing to mediate on Kashmir. And Mr. Modi has asked me to mediate on Kashmir. He is totally unpredictable. He is, what he thinks and what he says, you have no control over it. What is important today is my relations with the United States. They are very, strategic, comprehensive, global partnership. I need to preserve that. And in that, the trade relationship is a very important element. It's moving well. The negotiators have been going up and down. They have been traveling. They have made a lot of progress there. I think let that be over. there will be very many opportunities. There's G20 coming in South Africa. There are so many international meetings that are coming up.
Fair enough.
There'll be very many meetings that,
There will be more
will
opportunities,
be
but the current
ASEAN.
situation that our country is facing, and will oil prices now go through the roof? Siddharth Zarabi, how is India, diversifying purchases? What will be the overall impact on global prices and on the Indian consumer?
Well, lots to unpack in that question, but please remember there is a 30-day grace period.
Yes.
So in effect, the stoppage will come into effect after that period. Inbound tankers carrying Russian crude are not being stopped in high seas, but there is a broader impact that will go beyond oil prices. Remember, pump prices of petrol, diesel have remained frozen and static for almost 3 years now, and I expect that to continue. As has been pointed out, upswings or downswings, there is a net effect that has not been passed on to the consumer, and the consumer in India is perhaps getting compensated in a higher manner through the increased subsidy bill, which is at its highest point, not just the center, in fact states as well. And one final point that we need to keep in mind, let's connect it back to the ongoing trade conversation with the United States. We've heard Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal speaking at Berlin, reiterating that trade is not just about a particular deal or a pact, it's about how two countries do business with each other, how they treat each other. I expect that the next 30 days also, with this sanction and the alternative supply arrangements that will be driven at the company level, it would mean that there is scope for perhaps coming to an agreement.
Okay.
But does this clearly indicate that the path has been smoothened for the trade deal? From the Indian point of view, Gaurav, remember, it was never about some quantity of crude oil or a percentage. It is about reciprocity and the way you treat the country. And I don't see that stance being diluted or being changed. The country will remain firm in dealing with the United States in the way that it wants to.
Okay. Salman Soz, so what the Congress describes as surrender is perhaps being analyzed as smart strategy. India took advantage of the discounted Russian oil till whatever time it was possible, and now that sanctions are in place, India is looking for plan B. But you believe, or does the Congress party believe, that this is letting a comprehensive strategic partner, Russia, down? You think Russia will not understand this?
Well, look, you delve in strategy. Buying Russian oil at that time was not strategic, it was opportunistic. So let's not call that strategy. If it was strategy, then we would have been thinking multiple, years ahead and see how it might unfold, given what was going on in the world, even at that time. So I think that was not strategy. We were not ready. We have not been ready. We've been kind of, I don't know what's happened to our Ministry of External Affairs. We have not been ready. I think we've been found wanting. As far as, people may disagree with this, but I think by not, I can understand we didn't go for the Gaza conference. Okay, fine. But not going to ASEAN, I think that is a bad look for the country. That is not a good look for anybody who's going for major negotiations on trade with a bully. The best way to deal with a bully typically is that you kind of stand up to the bully. Now, you don't want to stand up to a bully who's really much stronger than you and get a broken nose, but want to show. You want to show that you have a
both
backbone.
Professor Ranganathan and Siddharth have their hand up, but go on, sir, complete your point. I'll come to both my guests in just a moment.
I think optics in this case matter, and the Prime Minister is a master of optics because that's what he's given this country for a long, long time. The least he could have done is just shown a little more backbone so that President Trump understands that this is not a guy who's just going to cave. I hope he doesn't cave. For the country's sake. I hope he doesn't. But it doesn't. I mean, ASEAN was a missed opportunity. I think the Prime Minister was not well advised on this.
Okay, Siddharth, you want to quickly go first? Then
I'll be very honest. The real agenda, if at all, for India and its leader to visit the ASEAN should be to seek a comprehensive review of the India-ASEAN FTA that was signed in 2009. has proven to be detrimental to Indian companies, small, medium-sized, large companies. Okay. It's a backdoor for Chinese goods to come into India. It's one of the worst deals that have happened as far as our trade policy is concerned. Personally, I would only look forward to a visit if the main agenda was to review that deal and make it more equitable for hundreds of millions of people in India.
Fair enough. Professor Ranganathan, you wanted to also come in on that additional point. Will Russia not understand what India is going through now? Will Russia feel let down if India were not to take oil from these two Russian companies once they've been sanctioned?
No, Russia won't, and Putin has already said it, if not in so many words, because China is also in the same boat. But a couple of points out here. Number one, the fact remains that during COVID also people were working and conducting businesses online. So for Salman to put so much emphasis on physical presence of Modi is surprising. Having said that, it was Congress that was berating Modi for going abroad just 2 weeks ago, saying कि Prime Minister घर पे इतना काम है और आप बाहर बार-बार क्यों घूम रहे हैं? अब उल्टा हो गया. But finally, that wonderful spectacle frame that Salman is wearing, Gaurav, that is Tom Ford's 50,000 rupees. What would you say if he were to buy that instead of 50,000 rupees but 75,000 rupees? Wouldn't you say that is foolish? So if we are getting oil for less from Russia, why wouldn't we buy it? Same goes for Salman's Tom Ford specs.
Okay. Salman, about your specs in 10 seconds.
Honestly, I don't know if these are Tom Ford specs. If they are, then I must be doing well. So I have no idea. Honestly, I don't. But I do think, on a more serious note, that this online business and all that, it's not. Honestly, let's put a hand on your hearts. This is not a good look. And by the way, if we have to do something, if there's a problem, as Siddharth says, on the trade deal with the ASEAN, right? That is the time to push it. We got to push it. Now, President Trump is going to meet Xi Jinping at the APEC conference after this. He's not going to be at ASEAN. And maybe there was an opportunity for him to actually engage with him bilaterally on the sidelines, maybe quietly. But I think, I think it's a missed opportunity. It doesn't, and by the way, it doesn't look good for India. It doesn't look good for us.
Okay. Let me also bring in Ambassador Sajanhar on the Russia point for a moment. You've been to Russia so many times. You've interacted with them so many times here and there. I want to understand from you. India sought CAATSA waiver to buy the S-400 system despite sanctions. And India pushed back on that. Now, India is seeking additional air defense systems. But will India be letting Russia down if post-sanctions India does not take oil from these two Russian companies?
No, I don't think so. I think Russia is mature enough and it knows what is happening around the world. We have a special privileged strategic partnership. Putin is going to be in India in another month and a half's time, and our relationship continues to be very robust and very strong. I don't think there is going to be exchange of Jaishankar is going to be in Moscow, Lavrov is going to be coming here, NSAs are going to be exchanged. I don't think that is going to be any problem. I think let's also face it. India has not caved into anything that Mr. Trump has said. If India had caved in, we would have been able to get this agreement in beginning of July. From our point of view, it was ready. But as far as Mr. Trump wanted, he wanted things on GMO, he wanted things on textiles, he wanted things on, what he had been able to get from the whole world, from EU, from Japan, from South Korea, from Vietnam, from Indonesia, everyone, UK, that free market access, zero tariffs on American products, and there were 15 or 20% tariffs on these products coming. India did not succumb to that. I think that is another aspect that has really, been rankling Mr. Trump, that he wants to go, chest thumping that I have been able to open this market. India has not given him that pleasure. So, India has...
That's something, you mentioned that today. That's exactly what Ian Bremmer has also said, that countries like India and China are not succumbing to US pressure. And we had played out what Ian Bremmer said yesterday on India First. I've run out of time on this part of the show. I want to thank all our guests for this stellar discussion that we've had on the current situation and how it continues to unfold. Trinidad and Tobago are taking a major step to honor their Hindu heritage. Plans are now underway to establish a Divya Bhavya Ram Mandir, a Ram temple in the capital city, the Port of Spain. And they really connect with their culture and how. We leave you with these images.
Within the region and within the hemisphere is seen as one of those meccas where you have, whether it is Bhagavad, whether it's Ramayana, a lot of the cultural and religious expression of India through Hinduism in particular has been maintained and kept alive here. So the Ramlala initiative is something that we welcome, it is something we support,